This is best practices for establishing the development environment and productivity. My name is Eric Pigors. I am a solution architect on the Fast Track team. And the goals today are to give you the information to understand how the development pieces of Dynamics 365 for Operations fit together and the benefits of them. And that information helps you make the right decisions when you're using your development environment sometimes, and give you the information to set up a Dynamics 365 for Operations development environment and be productive using it, at least relatively so. So we're going to talk about setup, and we're not going to create the VSTS project, but we're going to set up the development machine and things like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is packages and models. And a package is a deployment and a compilation unit of one or more models. All the files in a package are deployed to production and other non-development environments. Any environment that you don't have source code on. So you can do this with a demo environment. Just stay away from the dev tools and use LCS to install a deployable package, just like you would on a UAT or an environment. And it's represented by folders in the packages folder, which is such as application suite bin, which is obviously where the assemblies are. There's also a reports folder that has the RDLs in it, a web folder that has the JSON for the forms, and I think there's a resources folder, stuff like that. So anyway, important thing, deployment and compilation. So assemblies, right? When you do a build, that's what you get. A model, on the other hand, is a design time concept containing metadata and X++ source. Metadata like field definitions in a table. All the X++ metadata that is really not any different than it was in 2012. That's the one part that's the same, or pretty similar, right? A new model can use a new package, which is preferred, or an existing package. What do you get? Why would you use an existing package? Anybody know? Overlayering, that's right. That's why it's not preferred, because if you heard, they announced today, or it's been coming, that in the fall, the application will likely be soft sealed, and in the spring of 2018, it will be hard sealed, just like the platform is now.
The application suite?
Right. Application suite. But we'll talk about that later. The files in a model, the model files are not deployed to production and other non-development environments. So there's no source code on UAT or prod. That's how it works. That's a big change, of course. But there's also no dev tools, so this source files don't really do you that much good anyway. Represented by a folder in its packages folder, which is very subtly different than the packages folder, such as App Suite Foundation. That's the sys model for, a good part of the application is in that folder. And the AOT is a collection of packages and models and is represented by the packages folder. On a lot of VMs, it's on the J drive, JAOS service, packages local directory. So the references, a model is defined with references, and it can contain references to other models. So the app suite, being the sort of catch-all, has references to just about everything that's not test related. You should, for models you create, you should minimize the references. Don't add references that you don't need. And a good example of this is don't include form adapter references in your models that are going to production, because for one thing, the deployment will fail because of it, and because the form adapters themselves are not deployed to production. Okay, so the sys models, which are what we ship with every release of the application, the only way to get them is on a new development machine. I mean, you can copy them from one, but there's not a package for them or anything like that. They just come on a new machine. And the hotfixes are applied directly in the sys layer. So if you need a new main account table because of a hotfix, the hotfix version replaces the original one. It's different than 2012, right? They came in an overlayer fix. Okay, so I'm going to create a model, and we'll note that the descriptor is the key, and then I'm going to add that model to VSTS. Okay. So all the Dynamics 365 for operations stuff is under this Dynamics menu. Going to Model menu, I'm going to create a model. And just kind of want to show you have to have a publisher because otherwise the next button doesn't enable. And then it's kind of practice to make a display name that doesn't have that uses spaces. I'm going to go with a new package because that's the hip thing to do now. And I know that I'm going to use Application Foundation and Platform as the default. So I'm just going to use those two references, which I talked about, right? So we got the name, we got the layer, but the layer's not that important anymore. I guess it does what it always did. It breaks the ties. If there's two models in the same package that have the same resource, whoever's got the superior layer wins. But generally, right, you can have model and model and model, lots of models, so you don't really need the layers in that sense. But they're still there. Package, references, and finish. And the first tip of productivity is when you add a project, I'm going to mark it. Oops. Oh, there you go. I bumped it, but on that dialog to add a project, I think there's a drop-down down there that says, do I want to create a new solution or add it to the existing solution? Now, I didn't have one yet, but a lot of times when you're adding things to a project, to a solution, you would just want to add that project to the current solution and not create a new solution. So pay attention to that. Okay, so let me go back and do a little bit more of the presentation before I finish that. So I'm going to talk about Visual Studio Team Services. The Visual Studio Team Services, or VSTS, it was originally called VSO, Visual Studio Online, is the version control used for operations. And we use it for the primary benefit of consistency. Things like when you install a hotfix, make sure that it's on all of your development VMs and obviously in production. We won't really cover this. I don't think we really use it that much. But the terminology that I like to use is the part before the .Visual Studio is the account, and the / on the end is the project. And that is the project. And I think that other part is called the account. But sometimes when you're navigating around on the VSTS website, those are important to know. So the things that we add to VSTS for operations include packages and models, including ISV related. Now I'm going to kind of keep it simple, but there's a couple sessions listed that are related sessions, and they're going to talk a lot about ISVs, solutions and getting them in version control and stuff. But the short answer is that you put that stuff in version control for consistency so that it's on all your environments, all your dev environments. And then, and maybe more importantly than consistency is that's how it gets to the build, right? Because the only things that come on a new VM, of course, are the sys models. You also check in the sys X++ hotfixes, so those changes to the sys models, so it's kind of a sparse part of it. And you do that for consistency. And because a build machine, when it creates a build, it sort of starts over with a fresh packages folder, and then it puts what's in VSTS over top. So if you got a fresh packages folder, it'll have the old main account. You want the updated one in your case. It does not contain most of the sys X++, which is just sitting on the machine in the folder. And it does not contain binary hotfixes, which are generally platform things. Platform binary hotfixes have, thousands and thousands of files, registry stuff maybe, all kinds of stuff. The only stuff that really goes in VSTS is X++ and binaries that are there instead of X++, like an ISV binary. Things that you need to do a build, basically. When you create your VSTS account, the Team Foundation version control is required. Git is not supported. There's a certain folder structure that comes with. It's trunk, out the root, it's trunk and then main. That folder structure will get created when you deploy a build machine in the VSTS project. If you didn't do a 2012 code upgrade, or else you can just create it manually if you, for some reason, like on my machines, I don't have a build VM because I'm just doing demo things like this, sample stuff. So I don't have, so I just go, you can just map it and create it yourself. It's important because a code automatically upgrades whatever is in trunk main. So that's sort of the minimum. And there's another session on continuous ALM stuff where they talk about multiple branches. And even in this sample, I'll have a dev branch and a main branch because that makes a lot of sense. Best practices for VSTS are to favor small check-ins. 2 check-ins for 1 feature is better than 1 check-in for 2 features, because if you have a dev branch, you want people to do frequent check-ins, each feature, not 10 check-ins for each feature necessarily, because you want to, after they've passed a certain quality bar, then you'll have a person merge them to the main branch because they're ready to get closer to production, right? Good tip is to prefix your check-in comment with your feature ID or name so that when whoever is merging the things knows that if there is 2 check-ins for 1 feature, they get them both. So let me go back to my here now. So we talked about VSTS a little bit now. So I already mapped it to save time, but the mapping looks like this. The metadata folder goes to the packages folder. So I have tech conference, project, trunk, dev, metadata. And then I do have main mapped, but I just have it mapped to the temp folder because for merging, if you want to merge, if you want to do merging on your dev machine, the target has to be mapped, but it doesn't have to be mapped to the packages folder. So I just have it mapped to a temp folder. And if we have time, I'll merge my change down here. So, okay. Just taking a look at that, and then we'll come back. But so what you do is it starts wherever you're highlighted on this tree. That's where it'll start. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add a file because a model, the model I just created is not it's not a normal X++ thing. It's sort of above X++ or below it, depending on how you look at things. So I have to add it manually. And there's this, the fifth icon over is add items to folder. And so I'm in my, this is the what's on my computer, right? So I can go to, I can browse to the J drive, AOS service. Now here's my packages folder. So my package is called Tech Conference. Right there. And you can see under the Tech Conference folder, this is a brand new package, never been compiled, so I have a descriptor file, and the descriptor is literally the key to a model. And then this Tech Conference folder, in the second one, is where all the X++ guys go in their own folder. So if I scroll down just a little bit, there's the classes folder. But what I want to do is I want to select the descriptor and check in the descriptor because, like I said, that's literally the key, and that's what the build machine uses to identify the model, and then it has the dependencies in, or the references and all that stuff in it. You can click next, but you'll only do it once because there's nothing on that page except the same as what you're doing. So now, if I go to the Team Explorer, which is my link to VSTS on this machine, and I can go to my pending changes, I'll see in my included changes that there's a folder called, it's a descriptor folder for my package, and then I have that XML file. And whatever's included will be checked in when I click check in. So I'm just going to add Tech Conference model. Not going to lie, my computer is acting funny, so I hope she holds together. Add Tech Conference model, and if I check it in, it'll ask me, and I've always left that on. So now if I can go into my dev branch metadata, and I'll see I just have a Tech Conference folder because that's the only thing. All of sys is just sitting on the machine. And there is my descriptor. And I can do view history. And you can see I just checked it in like a minute ago. So it's good. So that was just models and packages and remembering to check in your descriptor. Now, my model's empty right now, but I don't need to... I could check in all those empty folders if I wanted to, but I don't really need to do that. And I'll add some code in a minute, but the model's checked in. So Visual Studio is the development environment for Dynamics 365 for operation. It requires a license on every machine. There is a trial, so if you can pretty much sign in with any live ID and you'll get 30 days or something for sure, but it requires a license. And you always have to run it as an admin. The packages folder on the VMs has got the security cranked down pretty tight on it. If you want to do something in Notepad, you have to run Notepad as an admin to be able to save the files in the packages folder, in which time you would probably add them to version control, or unless you're just messing around. But so you need to run it as an admin. If you don't, when we go in, I'll show you the AOT in Visual Studio, because there's a bunch of people who haven't seen it. It'll be empty because it doesn't have the privilege to read the folders where they're at, because I mentioned it very briefly, but the AOT is just that folder and everything under it in the file system now. It's not in the database. It's not. That's where it's at. The AOT is, again, under the View menu in Visual Studio, Application Explorer. The shortcut is Control E, and there's a filter where you can type stuff at the top, use that to find, whatever you need to find. You can also, as long as you don't have a filter entered, you can right-click on where it says AOT, and you can switch from classic view, which is the resource types, classes, tables, user interface, and then forms is under that, and all that. There's a couple levels of a tree, to model view, and it'll show you in the model view, and then you open up Tech Conference, and there'll be classes and forms and all that stuff. So I showed it to you, but you map VSTS to Visual Studio, the VSTS repository, which is, a website, online thing, to the local machine. Of course, you need a local copy of those files that are in there, because that's how you compile and how things are fast. The same local folder on the machine can only be mapped once on that machine. That's why two people can't use the same VM. You can't log in as, person A and person B on the same VM, because you both can't map the packages folder. Not to mention, there's probably not enough horsepower for you to both to be on there at the same time. So it was in that mapping window where the left side is the folder in VSTS, and the metadata folder goes to the packages folder of the VM, which is on the J drive that I talked about. On a VHD, it's right on the C drive. They only have one drive. It's C AOS service, packages local directory. And then you can also do projects, and there's a projects folder under main and under dev normally, and they map to the default Visual Studio projects folder on a machine, which is under the documents. I showed pending objects. That's where you check in local changes. That included is what will get checked in when you click check in. The excluded is what won't, but if you want to do two check-ins, right, you can move something down to excluded, do a check-in, and then move it back and to do two check-ins. Or never, but you can just push them down there and forget about them if you like. Sometimes you don't want to check in projects. I think we have more on projects in a minute. So, the Source Control Explorer, which was the main window on the left side when I was in there a little bit, that showed the VSTS tree view on the side, and then the folders were kind of in the right pane of that left thing. And I showed you add items to folder for non-X++ things like model descriptors. And then there's history. And then the toolbar up there has got things like you can look at what's deleted. Since you're looking at version control, you can see the things that are deleted and look at the history on things that are deleted, which is, handy. The projects, I created one project, and it's specific to a model. So if I have a sys model and I have an overlayer, that's two different projects. And when you add something to a project, that determines where it gets added on the disk, and then it'll get picked up by you can add it to version control from there. You don't need references in the projects. They're simply containers for resources. I'll show you an example of one that, other than whatever you're working on, but there's some reference kinds of things sometimes that are nice to do. But the real important thing about them is that a project is a build thing in operations. Because AppSuite has still got, like, if you can do properties on the AppSuite folder, and there's tens of thousands of files in there still. A lot of things. It takes maybe 10 minutes to compile on one of these machines. Well, when you're working on something, you don't want to wait 10 minutes to test something. So what happens when you do a build in Visual Studio and a project is the compiler tears apart the assembly into little pieces, and then it only builds the pieces that are in this project. So I don't know if it's not exactly one form, but it's like maybe a file for every 10 forms or 100 forms, and then whichever ones of those are in your project, they get built. So it can just take a few seconds to do a build. But the bottom line is that the project build time is proportionate to what is in the project, not what's in the model. under that Dynamics 365 menu, there's a build option, which of course puts it all back together. And did I mention that the first build will take a little while, a little longer, because like maybe a minute, because it has to tear it apart if you've just done a full build. But that's the reason that that's done. A solution is a collection of projects. And it's a little misleading, but what you check into the projects folder in VSTS is the solution. It has projects underneath it. So, okay. So let me see here. So I'm going to go and create a customization and check it in. And then I'm going to do a hotfix too, because those are interesting. Possibly. Any questions before we... Yep.
You said, the hotfix will be delivered as this model now. Is it possible to give it in Visual Source directly so that it can be deployed automatically to the development environment?
Yes, we do check them in.
And for ISV, is it also possible?
Yeah, if an ISV gives you X++, they would do that because of overlaying, most likely, although it's not a requirement. You would check it in to VSTS because it needs to be built. You really only want to have one package, and so the build VM will take whatever's in all the system models that have changes, and then any other models, and it looks for descriptors. So as long as there's a descriptor, and you can also have a binary file, it'll handle those. You actually need a hotfix on update 3, but those are supported. So does that answer the question?
Not exactly, but I'll come back to that.
Okay.
One more question. Will you be covering the build as well later on?
The build? There's another session. I think it's on Wednesday. It's like continuous delivery, where he talks a lot about builds. So I'm not going to talk about them. Other than in the, behind their back, I guess. Okay, so got my project, and so one trick is in order for VSTS to be aware of the version control, I'm going to add the solution to version control, and it's really small, but there's a little green plus beside the project now. And I think by the solution too. I don't have my glasses, but and that means that they're like under version control. And if I look in the Team Explorer, there they are. They're in my included changes already. And I'm actually gonna exclude them because this is just a sample project. It doesn't really have anything too interesting that I need to hang on to. But I forgot to show you. I'll show you that other project right now. Recent projects. And what projects are good for, to me, when I usually check in a project is, it's like a group of things that I gather for some purpose. Like, here's all the classes related to the ledger journal trans decorator pattern, right? That's something I might reuse. Or if I have a journal posting, all the sort of classes that are related to journal posting, I might have those in a project and check them in because those are useful to me repeatedly, right? This one, this tech conference one, I need it today, but because that's how things get into the right model. But I don't really plan to use it tomorrow. It's this weird one. Oh, yeah. Okay, so Control-Shift-A is, I'll show you here, add new item, and it's Control-Shift-A, and I am just going to add a class because just about anything you do with extensions where you're adding something to sys requires a class. And I'm going to call it Tech Conference Handlers. And it will hopefully appear here. Meanwhile, I'll go over here and I got some code that I wrote already. Oh yeah, it did make it. Here we are. Now I'm not doing too much here, but I just got a couple. I got an event handler here, but now I need to go to the AOT, and I'm looking for the batch job history form. I had already searched for it, so there it is. So there's that filter, and now I got everything that has batch job history in its name, including this staging table, tables, forms, code, and what I want is the form. But I don't want the form. What I want to do is I want to right-click on the form, and if I was in a model that, let's see, how does that work? If I was in a model that was in the sys, or in the application, this is, let me go back here. It says that this, it says beside it that this batch job history is in the application foundation model. So if I right-click on it, if I was in an overlayer model for application foundation, which means it would have to be in the sys application foundation package, but a different model than the sys model. Then customized would be available. That's overlayer. But I just want to create an extension of it. And see, this is where I could create it in a new project, and then I would probably want to add that project to this solution and not create a whole new solution, because I may probably want to hang on to what I already have done. But I'm just going to put it in. This is a valid model for doing, this is a valid project for doing an extension, so that's what I'm going to do. And it gives it this terrible name, .extension, and if we all created a model, they couldn't all be named that. So I have to do something to mine to make it. I'll just put a prefix or a suffix on it. I think if I do that at the end, it'll add them to version control. But anyway, what I want to do now is I'm going to open up this extension, the designer for the extension, which is a way for me to add a button to this form without overlayering. And let's see here. Oh, it's up here. Button group. There's log button. That's the info log button. But I'm going to do a new button. And so my extension just contains this one button. And I'm just going to call it download button. And then I'm going to choose properties on it. And you should, if you're planning on changing the properties, you should, I did the keyboard, but you should choose properties to get to here. Don't just open up the property sheet, but actually right-click it or do Alt-Enter and open up the properties if you're going to actually change them. And I'm just going to put a couple things. I don't need the name, but I need download, and I need, let's see, I think that might be it. It's not a big button. I think that's enough. It doesn't really matter. Now, the normal thing I would do, right, is I would just override or add a click button, a click method, right? But I can't do that because this is an extension. So what I have to do is open up these events, and there's an onClicked, and I can copy the event handler method, and then I can go over to my event handlers here, and do that, and I don't know if we're already off the rails, so we won't have any comments. And I got a static method here, so I called it something else last time. Otherwise, I think that's it. I'm going to go back to my project. Got my two things in here, and I'm going to do Control-Shift-B, which is build. Everything following along so far? Any questions while we're... Now this is the real benefit of extensions, right? My model has two things in it, so it's going to compile pretty fast. In fact, even though we're all watching at time, I will... I'll show you how to do a full build too. Full build, and then I'll scroll down and find it. There it is. And we're done. Okay. Got a couple warnings, but those are not my fault. So, okay. Oh, I almost forgot the most important part. We got to check it in first before we test it. Let's check it in. Well, we should test it first, I guess. So I have the browser open, but since I did a build, it'll restart IIS, so I need to refresh it anyway. Pushed F5, but it's going to be very not sure if this will actually work because I haven't written this one in a while. I did run a batch, so hopefully I have an executed batch. Okay. So if I go, I'll just go, oh, it's terrible. It's terrible that these VMs don't have a better version of IE on them, that all the icons show up. Batch jobs. There's probably more in here than I think, but I'm going to switch this to contains. Okay. Now I'll go to the history form. And there's my download button. And I think if I click on the log, there is some information in there. Right? So I got this. Invoice account US01, the free text invoice posting process is complete, blah, blah, blah. Great. Now I'm going to, now I'm going to try my download. Didn't work.
I don't think you put your code in the camera. I think you got to move your code from the code you copied to the method I created.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Yes, thank you. It gave me the whole method. I thought it was just a heading. Thank you. Try a VS build. Done. 1.9 seconds. Now, when I click it, right, I'm going to get. I probably should have just done the refresh. Oh yeah, there it is. That was the IIS reset. Okay. Well, luckily it remembers the contains. There it is. Batch job history. Oops. Oh, okay. I think the pop-up blocker got me. Let me try it one more time. I think I enabled downloads on this thing. There we go. Okay. Oh, not okay. Now we got to check it in. And we got to do the hotfix too. Done playing around. Okay. Back to, so now that they got the pluses, all I have to do is go to the pending objects. And there they are. And there's my package, or my model folder, tech conference, and the class and the form extension folders. So same thing. All I have to do is check it in. Great. I will close the solution. I don't even need a project or anything to do a hotfix. Go to the Dynamics menu, and it's called Apply Hotfix. I already downloaded it, of course. It's on the desktop. Yeah, it's this KB I picked, so there's one file. Before I do that, I will go to the packages folder. Oh, so here's one of the other tips. I haven't done it so that I could do it. AOS service, packages, local directory, put it right there because you'll go there all the time. Oh, this is in, this is in App Suite, and it's a class. Got your trends, statement, DP. Oh, had a little mystery there, okay. So all the files in there are dated October 25th. That's right before 11/16 or 16/11, right? So I selected my deal here. Yep, there it is. And now I'll click Prepare. Now this is important, right? If I click Apply, it'll work. It'll put the new file in the Packages folder, but I won't have a copy of the old one. And if for some reason I want to roll back, when I roll back, it'll roll back, except that it'll say, okay, you deleted something out of version control, and that file that was there originally will not be there. There will be no file, and the report will not compile. So the earlier versions didn't have this prepare. So this checks in what would be replaced by the hotfix prior to actually checking in the hotfix. So it's important that you put a couple things together here. You have to close this prepare. When it's done, you close this window, you go to the pending objects, you check it in, and then you come back and you do it again with the apply button, and then the pending objects will contain the hotfix. And that gives you two things that you can, because if they're you can't do them, it's the same file, so if you do only one check-in, it'll be the last thing, and you won't get the ability to roll back, which is not that big a deal, but sometimes you want to roll them back. This thing can be a little slow, but it might be done. So there's two things. They're sitting in the including objects, so I'll just call this KB prepare. And you can see that they're both adds. Oh, I guess stretch this out a little. And they're in Application Suite Foundation. That's the sys model. So I'll check them in. And then I'll go back. There is a command line for this. It also has a prepare. This is probably easier, but it is easier. But once you have the commands for the command line one, they're pretty easy to reuse those commands too, if that's what you prefer. I'm going to make sure I got the right thing. And now I'll do apply. Following along okay? Does that make everything so far seem logical? And we're okay. We started at what? We got till 6:30? Is that right? Okay. Yep. Okay. So we're think we're, oh, there it is. That one has a little dialog. Okay, so now I've got, okay, so we learned something today because I thought this was going to happen. So we have the class and the query, and then this AX update is a little file that contains this. The AX update file number is not the KB, but inside is the KB. But you'll see here that we also got the foundation model. The foundation model descriptor. Why that's there is because there's no other descriptors for that package checked in, and it won't build it. The build machine won't build it without at least one descriptor. Now, if you had your own model in there, it would not have done that. But since it did, here's what will happen. If I check this in like this, the descriptor goes in the second check-in. I roll it back, and I lose my descriptor, which means I lose my entire application suite model. And because it's sort of like, I don't know, sort of like putting all your stuff in your suitcase and then taking the other suitcase. You lose everything because you don't have that key to it, the key to it. Maybe taking your suitcase but forgetting the key to the lock on your suitcase. So, and this is a bug. I just logged this bug on the prepare statement because the prepare should have added it because it's a part of the pre-step, not the hotfix per se. So I'm going to use the exclude everything but the foundation model. I selected that descriptor, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it hotfix prepare 2. So I'm going to check the descriptor in first, right? And then that's the thing I said, 2 check-ins are better than 1. It's kind of along those lines. And then I'm going to go back down here and move them back to the include, and now I can check in my hotfix. Okay, now that was a lot. Does everybody follow along? Any questions? What was that? You can you use prepare in case you want to roll it back. Because if you check all those things in, before the hotfix, those 2 files were sitting on that machine, not in version control, just sitting there, right? And we said, let's put them in version, we replaced them, and then let's put them in version control, right? So if you roll back, it'll say, okay, you just deleted this out of version control, I'm going to delete it off the disk, and then you don't have that file anymore. You don't have the first version of it. It's not the end of the world, right? Because you only really need it if you have to roll it back. But sometimes you want to roll them back. It's actually, right, it's a good lesson. It explains to you how things work in the packages folder and in the builds and stuff. That's half the reason why I included it. If the descriptor, the same thing would happen to the descriptor file. It would get rolled back. No descriptor. It's like all those files in the application suite model don't exist. They don't get included in the build if there's no descriptor. The prepare should have included the descriptor, right? That's the bug. So I just worked around the bug by checking in the descriptor before I checked in the update. And I think the last, right, if I do that. Now, this one is dated today because I just installed a hotfix. And now that one little part of the sys model is in my version control. It's been there a little longer than that. Maybe, probably, I would say update 2 for sure, but there was always the command line version. There's the wiki article is install a metadata hotfix. It has the commands for the command line too. I'm sorry.
That was via runbook. You can use runbook.
Yeah, no, a runbook is for a binary hotfix or a deployable package. This is X++ source code, so it's this. There's a there's a thing that works on those SCDPP files. That's the ones, they're small files, you know. The binary updates and the packages are either 400 meg or a gig and a half or whatever. These are just tiny little things. It's on the command line. I can't remember the. Yes, thank you. And it's in the packages folder, bin folder. Packages bin is where that thing is. The runbook thing is inside every deployable package or hotfix. It's right there. Wherever you unzip it, you get that. And so this thing, you know, is 4 kilobytes because it has those 2 source files in it, and that's it. And the zip is in here, and of course I did unblock it after I downloaded it from LCS. Okay.
What is the best practice to ship hotfixes, you know, via binaries or via
The ERP hotfixes come as X++ because we still allow overlayering, right? There are no X++ hotfixes for the platform anymore because we don't allow overlayering. At least for the newer versions, right? Okay. Let me see, she talked about include, exclude. Oh, I can, yeah, I'll go do that. So now what I'm going to do, I think I just do it this way. I can right-click in my VSTS, and I can go to branching and merging, and I can merge. And so the source is dev, and oh yeah. So this, I should have probably not used the same name for everything, but this tech conference is my VSTS project. Not my Visual Studio project, my VSTS project. So my version control. Here's trunk. Main. And actually, is that what I want? I'll just, yeah, dev. And I'm going to select the change sets that I want to merge. There they are. So I can. So see if it's kind of funny, right? If I add the code for my batch history customization, but I don't add the descriptor, it doesn't exist. And the other thing is these guys come up in numerical order, and you can select groups of them. So I'm going to just do I'm not going to move the hotfix. I'm just going to move and now all those things will end up in my pending. So, and that's pretty much how it works, right? Everything that I do, it ends up in pending, and I get a chance I could just discard it at that point if I wanted to, because it's not in version control until I actually check it in. But this is the extension, this, that, and there's my descriptor, their trunk main. Yeah, this is on my C drive, so. Like I said, I just mapped this to C temp, but it has to be mapped to do the merge. But then I would have a build machine connected to dev main. I could do a build and it would be ready. So I'm just gonna. I'll check it in. Okay. Oh, that's what I was going to do. I was going to just try to remember a couple of other things to show on the... I'll do those at the end. So I created a customization, checked it in, and then I installed the X++ hotfix and checked it in. So a couple of other tips. I usually pin a shortcut, the same shortcut on all my VMs, and make sure that the Visual Studio shortcut is set to run as an admin, or if you want to remember to do it every time, you can learn to do it too, but just remember that it has to be run as an admin. You normally want people to use a dev branch like I did so that your developers aren't hanging on to changes for too long. You want them to check them in, and because they're safer there. And then the normal procedure would be more testing on what's in dev, and then the things that are test out well would be merged by a person down to main. And since things only get to main with a person doing it, you can start a manual build on the dev build machine for main. But if you have the more developers you have, it's a good idea to have a scheduled build on dev, have it build every night to make sure that two developers didn't check in, and have a conflict with each other and break it so it won't build. You can do that with one build machine. Just have a build definition for dev and a build definition for main. Yep. You can. There is shelf sets in VSTS, and you have to use them. You can use VSTS to do code reviews. It works pretty good. And we use other things internally, but the question was, why don't we use shelf sets? And there's a lot more features in VSTS and Visual Studio. These are sort of the basics to get you going, but separate branches I'm sure there's entire books written on the subject. So this is a simple example. It's on Wednesday, I think. The session is continuous deployment. A different guy who was supposed to be here got delayed, I guess, who taught me all this stuff, is doing that session. So it'll be really good information. He's going to have at least 3 branches and show build machines and the things that you can do with them. So.
Just showed us how to install the hotfix.
Yep.
Being an ISV, how do I deliver a hotfix?
The question is, how does an ISV deliver a hotfix? And it kind of depends, but if you have overlayering, right, then you probably have to either deliver the entire model, all the source code, or individual files that have changed, which is not really any different than what we do, right? For source code. And for binary, you don't have to. I was just talking to someone about this before the session, coming from the last session, about they're an ISV and people, they don't like the cumulative update idea, but we're encouraging, we're going to be shipping the ERP as a binary, which means we'll be going to cumulative updates. And the part that they don't like about that is that you can't pick or choose them. You just get, if you want update 10, you also get updates 1 through 9. So that's sort of your choice. But the other choice in that binary model is you'd have to have a branch for every customer because they would potentially have different versions of everything, right? Back here, yep.
Is there a possibility to make an automatic deployment from the build system to a test system? Or is there anything planned?
I would think that is planned, and if there's some LCS sessions, I think we know that for sure there's a plan to get a build out of VSTS, because when you do a build, it gets uploaded to the VSTS website, and you have to download it from there and then put it into LCS, and then you can deploy it on a demo or whatever. If you want to do a more, like for that development testing stuff, you can either do what I said, take one of those development builds and deploy it to a demo machine, or you can use that demo machine or any dev machine, sync it to main or to dev, get everything. Like in the morning, that's what would happen, right? A developer would come in the morning probably and get latest to pick up everything that the people who left a little later did yesterday. Or at some point, you're going to pull everything out of the development branch onto your local machine and get synced up with your coworkers. So then you would. I lost my train of thought. But then you could do a build on that dev machine. And then, like my dev machine, right, it's got a website, and you can do testing on it. Okay. Oh, I'll go with the red shirt here.
Is there any planned support for Git?
Not that I know of. Go ahead. Yep. You sorry. Oh, the question was, is there support planned for Git? And not that I know of. Go ahead.
How is it with local business data deployment option? If you just run on-prem, do you still need to use VSTS, which is the cloud?
That's probably, I mean, for sure it's TBD, but I would say so because you're going to need that code. And, there's not that much cloud here. The thing is that VSTS connects your dev machines, whether they're Azure or VHDs or whether they're here or there, scattered around the world. It doesn't matter because they all get pulled together through VSTS, and because it's a service like that. So, but I would expect that the code has to be the same, but I don't know that for sure for that since that's new. Go ahead.
For 2012, would we apply like a Hotfix or CD? Right now it's updating like the model version of our installed models. So if I apply my Hotfix to the VSTS, is there a way I can identify that Hotfix is installed?
I don't know, but it will not in the SCDPP unzipper or whatever it was won't install it twice. It looks for that little file. It's in the AX update folder. That's a new. They're not in the AOT, but it is in the model AX update, and it's those little files that tell you what KB it is, and that's how it knows not to do it twice.
So if I had like a dependency on it, I can just ship it with my and then it would just install it when I install it.
You have ISV code?
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotcha. That is a good question. I'm not sure how I know that we had back in like around RTW or before, I think RTW, there was a security hotfix and there was a binary and an X++ part of it. And if you didn't have, it would give you a message, you need to install this KB if you didn't have them both. So that's a good question, which eventually it'll go away with binary. Well, probably not. That's a good question for the servicing. The question was, can I require, if I have a dependency on a sys KB, how do I make sure that it's installed when I'm installing my ISV product? I'll write it down because that's a good question. Or if you go to are you going to go to these sessions like on continuous development and that kind of stuff? Ask it there. Yeah, they'll know. They'll most likely know. There was a guy back here. Yep. Mm-hmm. The question is, how many extension models should they have? And I don't know if we have, I don't know. Most people just have one, but I think it kind of depends on, you want to be careful with the, if you have features that are independent, completely independent, and you might want to ship them separately, then you would want them to be, they would actually have to be a separate package, right? Because if you have two models, one package, you can't separate them. But not too many, but if you want to have one and not the other, then they would need to be separate. Same package? If you have if you have two models and they're in the same package, they both would get shipped. And like, unless you like removed the descriptor when you did the build, right? Something like that we just learned. So if you want to be able to keep them independent, they would need to be each their own package. The only other thing is potentially size, but I think it more comes down to like, are they of sufficient size to stand on their own, and do they have any searching for the word, but do they have any kinship with each other, or should they be independent? Anyone else? Let me see. Let me go through I got a couple of other things here. I think we're still. Yeah. Let's see. Regular builds. So I usually pin a shortcut on my VM for IIS services, Visual Studio, Notepad, SQL Server, Management Studio, and PowerShell. Do have so here's PowerShell. And I put the command, it's on the slide, so you'll get it. But I just you can use PowerShell to search, since now the AOT is a folder, right? I can search the App Suite classes with PowerShell, and it can be handy. It can be handy to find things. Like I'm just looking for this label. Actually, Visual Studio has... the AOT has really good references. The references work pretty good. You can... Did I choose references? I don't know what I chose. I think I chose view references. I wanted to find references. So I can see on here, there's my method my event handler, right? It has a reference to that form, so it came up, and I can just double click, and there it is. Let's see. I added the packages folder to the Windows Explorer favorites bar on the upper left there. We don't install software that could affect servicing or reliability of the VM, like certain virus programs. The installing packages and stuff requires, I think it uses remote PowerShell, but I don't know what port or whatever, but you could break that stuff. There's the PowerShell command to use, and like I just have a whole library of them for different folders and stuff and models and whatever. Here's those other sessions. Development best practices and guidelines for optimal customization. So that's how to do extensions and do them well. Continuous delivery, that's about building and application lifecycle management, branching, all that kinds of stuff. And then automated test strategies for Dynamics 365 for operations. Joris is going to be at all three of these. And like I said, I learned most of what I know from him, so those are good sessions for sure. And surveys, and there will, like I said, the decks will be available and a recording so that you can take a closer look if you need to. And that's it. I'll be up here for a while, so I guess it's the last session, so you can go or... Thank you.